Welcome to R&R Living Life. In this segment of our travels, we spent a couple of days exploring Charters Towers before heading south towards Clermont, pulling in at an overnight spot near Frankfield between the Belyando Roadhouse and Clermont. After a slow start to the morning, we drove up to Towers Hill Lookout at 420 metres, giving us an excellent panoramic view over the town and the surrounding area. While at Tower Hill Lookout, Rick and I spent time reading the informative interpretive displays under the shelter. Local legend has it that an Aboriginal boy named Jupiter first discovered gold at the foot of Towers Hill in December 1871. After the discovery was confirmed in January 1872, it motivated one of Australia's most frenzied gold rushes that led to the establishment of Charters Towers. As we drove down the hill from the lookout, we could see some of the 29 concrete World War II ammunition bunkers scattered across the landscape, built in 1942 to store explosives for the US 3rd Bombardment Group. In one of the concrete bunkers, left as it was during the war, but with a glass panel added below our feet, with an interesting audio-visual display showing a cargo hold opening and dropping bombs, along with the audio from those on board. It was as if we were in the plane as well. There was also another interactive audio display that brought to life the town's wartime history, through stories as told by characters who lived here throughout the wartime years. The bunkers were constructed during World War II to protect bombs and ammunition. Some bunkers are close by and others are dotted further out around the hill. They were originally covered with mullock to disguise them from aerial reconnaissance. It was rather interesting to find out that none of the bunkers faced each other, and for good reason. In case of an accident and one exploded, it would not set off a chain reaction with the others. There were over 10,000 American personnel stationed in Charters Towers during the war. While looking at the bunkers, we spoke with a German couple who was shocked that we did not know of the World War II history of the area, or for that matter, the wartime history of Australia, other than what Rick and I have discovered or knew through self-interest, having never been taught it at school. From the Outlook and bunker site, we made our way back through town to the World War II bore sight range and compass swinging platform, a bomber target range used to test fixed armament accuracy on bombers and fighters, and a compass swinging platform used to check magnetic deviation in an aircraft's compass. Established at the northern end of wartime north-south runway at the Charters Towers airfield in 1943, the site featured a concrete hard stand for aircraft to be tied down on, a 360-metre range and an earth butt, vital for testing and calibrating replacement aircraft weaponry. Why, you might ask? Well, Charters Towers was a major inland strategic support base, chosen because Townsville, more specifically Garbutt, was vulnerable to Japanese attack. From the Boresight Range we made our way to the Burdekin Weir, about 17 kilometres from Charters Towers, and is the source of the city's water supply, which is pumped from the weir to a reservoir on Towers Hill. After a series of dry years in 1883, a steam-driven pumping station was set up on the Burdekin River. Unfortunately, the river ceased to flow in the drought of 1900 to 1902, requiring a weir to be built across the river to store water in. The weir was 274.3 metres in length and 4.8 metres high. The heritage-listed water supply infrastructure, constructed primarily between 1887 and 1910, was to provide reliable water to the region's gold mining operations and growing urban population. From the weir we made our way back through town and followed the Flinders Highway for about 20 kilometres east over the Burdekin River Bridge to McCrossan Park on the eastern side of the river, a very popular free camping area overlooking the Burdekin River, although the river here is fairly shallow, but during the wet season the river can rise significantly. The power of water was on display with a huge tree trunk that was left stuck in one of the shelters in the park. The former Burdekin River Rail Bridge, often called the McCrossan Bridge, was built between 1896 and 1899 to replace the original low-level flood-prone predecessor built in the 1880s. The newer 1960s metal truss replacement bridge, which we saw today, is State Heritage listed, constructed in the early 1960s and opened around 1963-64 to accommodate diesel locomotives, rendering the old bridge redundant. On our way back across the Burdekin, we stopped in at the flood marker on the western side of the bridge, showing where floods have reached, even needing an extension to the sign. It is hard to believe just how much water can surge not only under but over this bridge, and still flood to a height of nearly 22 metres. That amount of water is astronomical. The most significant major flood on the Burdekin near Charters Towers occurred in February-March 1946, reaching a record peak of 21.79 metres and nearly reaching the rail bridge at Salheim, though other historical major floods have occurred in the 2000s, occurring in 2008, 2009, 2019 and 2025. Once we had checked out the flood marker, we made our way back past Salheim, that was established in the early 1880s when the Great Northern Rail Line was being constructed. The Burdekin Gold Mine, operated by the Day Dawn Block and Wyndham Gold Mining Company, were located on the banks of the Burdekin River at Salheim from the late 1880s to the early 1900s, as was the Burdekin Meatworks just downstream of the current McCrossan Road traffic bridge. The meatworks operated from approximately 1895 to 1930. During the Second World War, the Salheim military camp was one of the largest stationary transit camps in Queensland, home to many young Australians making their way to or from the fighting in New Guinea. The camp was established by the arrival of the Australian 26th Battalion, Logan and Albert regiments in June 1941, under the command of the Australian Army's most highly decorated soldier, Lieutenant Colonel Harry Murray VC. What a great time we had had in Charters Towers, reliving some old memories and making new ones. The morning was quite foggy as we left the towers, but did make for an interesting morning as we made our way past where the rodeo grounds now are. The spiders' webs were again making a show this morning, and the faint smell of gidgee was in the air. As the morning progressed, the sun burnt off what little fog there was, and we were left with the clear day. I had not been along this road for over 40 years, and so much has changed from when it was all gravel, except for about 30 kilometres near Charters Towers. We began crossing rivers and creeks, first the Horton River, then Merry Creek, and then the Cape River, along with Boomerang and Sardine Creeks. It was easy to see that this section of the Gregory Development Road was slightly prone to flooding, with water flowing to the east. We then crossed North Bullock and South Bullock Creek. In recent years, the Burdekin and Horton catchments have experienced repeated and severe flooding events that have impacted the properties and livelihood of those living and working in the Burdekin and Horton catchments. We were on the divide between what is called the Desert Uplands and the Brigalow Belt, two distinct bioregions with their own unique characteristics and ecological significance. The Desert Uplands is known for its semi-arid climate, high rainfall variability and significant land use, covering an area of approximately 70,000 square kilometres of sandstone ranges, acacia eucalypt woodlands with a spinifex understory, and grazing country with eternal draining into ephemeral lakes. The Brigalow Belt is characterised by its mixed landscapes, including undulating to hilly areas, flat alluvial plains and extensive fertile clay soil regions, predominantly covered in a mixed eucalypt woodland, Brigalow Gidgee forests and open Mitchell grasslands, often referred to as the Brigalow country. Historically, the area was dominated by brigalow woodlands, but now largely fragmented due to heavily cleared and modified areas for cultivation and grazing, following the successful eradication of prickly pear. Along this section of the Great Inland Way of the Gregory Development Road, the country was forever changing, with high rocky peaks and short ranges surrounded by flat rural grazing and mining land, rather than a single continuous mountain range. It was nothing short of a vast tapestry of landscapes, from straight stretches of road a few kilometres long, followed by sweeping bends, dips, water crossings and rises. For a while we seemed to be driving along the top of a plateau, where we could look out across the hills in the east and the west. The edges of the road were beginning to show signs of neglect, with broken and in some cases deep edges. Then we were travelling through somewhat dry, flat to undulating plains, while there were signs of recent rains in the area that had left water holes along creeks and rivers with varied amounts of water. Next we would be travelling through areas of scrubland and pastoral grazing land. The red dirt and flowering acacia shrubs made for contrast along the edge of the road. It certainly was a changing landscape as we wove our way through the quintessential Aussie bushland, with the area near Belyando Crossing revealing open savanna and low-lying, sometimes flood-prone plains. We crossed Charlie's and Stockrout Gully, both filled with very large rocks, gravel and stones, with very little topsoil or sand, often caused by intense water erosion, but I think in this case they were more at the head of the gully rather than down further in the watercourse. With very little grass or tree cover to bind the soil, what little soil there is easily washed downstream. We passed a burrow pit filled with water, now acting as a watering point for cattle, and then a newer section of bitumen, part of Main Road's ongoing widening and strengthening of priority sections to 10 metres in width, completed between 2021 and 2025, already showing signs of wear and tear, as the saying goes. I wonder how long it will last before it starts to fall to pieces. I was still having trouble comprehending the amount of perennial dry feed there was in paddocks, along with huge amounts of black speargrass, desert mitchell and golden beard grasses. Approximately 220 kilometres south of Charters Towers, we pulled in at the Belyando Crossing Roadhouse, a convenient rest stop located on the Belyando Crossing. Rick and I had been through this area a long time ago, and I had worked just up the road a few kilometres. If anything, I felt that it had gotten smaller, though all the hotel rooms, camping and caravan space behind the roadhouse was something I had not been aware of during my time in the area. It was such a great place to stop and rest for a while, with fuel, meals, both sit down and take away, a bar, cold drinks and a small convenience store. The Belyando River rises in the Drummond Range, part of the Great Dividing Range southeast of Alpha, and flows north to join the Sutter River, eventually feeding into Lake Dalrymple, also known as Burdekin Falls Dam. As one of Queensland's longest rivers, just over 1,000 kilometres in length, it has many anna branches and nearly 30 tributaries, with a catchment area of around 35,000 square kilometres. Its journey snakes its way across the landscape, through a series of waterholes and lagoons, through vast arid grazing properties and thriving mining operations. The first European to discover the river was explorer Thomas Mitchell in 1846 on his fourth and last expedition. The rural locality of Belyando, west of Clermont, is primarily known for its vast agricultural and grazing lands, contributing to Queensland's farming and cattle industries. The area is sparsely populated, with a landscape of open plains and scrubland. Where once huge stands of gidgee covered the land, now, after clearing, there are open plains and cropping areas. There is nothing quite like the smell of gidgee, an all too familiar smell. Some might say foul smelling, but to both Rick and I, smells like home. Sometimes called stinking wattle, gidgee is endemic to northeastern Australia, but can be found in arid and semi-arid areas of eastern Australia, from central areas of the Northern Territory, northeastern South Australia, northwestern New South Wales, and here in central Queensland. It is found primarily on flat and gently undulating terrain, on heavily and relatively fertile clay and clay loam soils in the eastern parts of its range, and often forms mixed communities with brigalow, which favour the same soil types. In drier regions, gidgee is found primarily on red earths and loams in wetter depressions and low relief areas. As we left the Belyando Crossing roadhouse, we were crossing into the Isaac region, formed in 2008 through the amalgamation of three former shires, the Belyando, Broad Sound and Nebo shires, that now covers an area of around 58,000 square kilometres in the Bowen Basin. Geographically, the Isaac region is located within the Cosgrove hotspot, part of the world's longest continental volcanic chain that includes the Peak Ranges. We passed the turn-off to Twin Hills, renowned for its iconic races, rodeo and camp draft weekend. A few good weekends we had there in our younger days. Yes, dust, flies, hot sun and lots of drinking, but you certainly cannot underestimate the camaraderie between station people. Not far from the Frankfield turn-off, we pulled in at Dead Horse Yards, a designated free campsite for the night. As the afternoon settled, Rick and I stood and watched as a mob of bullocks grazed in amongst a stand of gidgee. Beside where we were camped were some Horatio cactus plants, a South American plant introduced as a pot plant that is an extremely invasive, long-lived fleshy plant that clambers over the ground or scrambles over other plants. Rick and I will leave you here at Dead Horse for this episode, as we sit and reminisce about years gone by and watch another amazing sunset while enjoying the lowing of cattle. Give us a thumbs up if you have enjoyed this episode. Join us next time as we make our way through Clermont, Capella, Comet and Blackwater. Cheers for now. Cherish every moment. Rick and Rosemary. R&R, living life.